Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. As he said, we'll be covering transitioning security mindsets from a traditional on-premise mindset to a more cloud-native mindset, particularly when migrating from like an on-prem environment to AWS. Real quick, let's cover sort of what we'll be talking about. So the on-premise, security paradigms versus AWS security paradigms. We'll cover some of that, and then we'll go over the AWS shared responsibility model, a model that we encourage all of our customers to review and be familiar with when leveraging AWS services. And then we'll step into sort of the culture of security and transforming organizations as a whole when it comes to that security mindset and how they view their culture of security. And then we'll lead into some next steps, sort of what you take away from this. You can go ahead and jump in here with sort of those traditional on-premise security paradigms, right? Where you as the customer, you're responsible for the full stack of observation, monitoring, implementing those security controls. You own all of it. You're responsible for all of it. Offloading can be a pain, and then when you have audits and compliance requirements, you introduce another layer of complexity there. And with a cloud-native, security paradigms in AWS, you have shared security responsibility, so you can offload some of the infrastructure security piece, and then use built-in security controls and automated security services that are typically built in and able to be leveraged very easily with AWS services, and then automated compliance tools and continuous monitoring built into those services as well. So back to that shared responsibility model that I spoke about. This is really what we encourage customers to become familiar with when they look at migrating to AWS, right? Where a lot of, we refer to it, AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, so all of the underlying cloud infrastructure and providing a secure service for you all to use. And then the customer is responsible for leveraging those services in a secure manner, right? Encrypting customer data properly, making sure encryption is enabled in transit, and configuring your network stack in a secure manner. So let's talk about a bit about cultural and organizational transformation when it comes to changing that security mindset from on-prem to AWS. What I like to say when it comes to adopting security tools is don't recreate them. If the security tool isn't your business's differentiator, why recreate it? Why rebuild it? Use something that's proven. And AWS has a lot of built-in native services that enable you to take advantage of that. And really, what we want to see customers do when moving to the cloud is make security everyone's responsibility. So instead of having a centralized security team or person within the business, everyone should be focused on security. So product teams, developers, everyone should have that in mind when building out on top of AWS and on the cloud. And that'll enable the product teams and the organization as a whole to focus on innovation and reinvention, as opposed to implementing security tools and platforms that aren't setting the business apart, right? Why focus time on a security tool when you want to be building your product, the thing that sets you apart from your competitors and advancing in the industry? And what we see is a common denominator for success, particularly with customers migrating to AWS, is building a culture of security. So it's not the technical ability of the customer, it's not the tools they select, it's how you form your culture around the cloud and how you look at security as a whole. Again, sort of enabling everyone in the company to be familiar with the security procedures and making everyone an owner of security, as opposed to having a single security team, right? And we want to make that mindset an enabler for the business, as opposed to letting security be a blocker. Typically, we see security can be a bit of a blocker for some companies. It should be the opposite. Security should be an enabler. It should enable those teams to feel comfortable putting out a service or a product that they're ensure that is secure. Next, we'll sort of touch on culture of security versus security culture, right? And we make sure to delineate that at Amazon. Right, culture of security is the entire company, how they view security, what security means to the entire company, whereas security culture is talking about the culture of that specific security team, of your security team, right? How does the security team view security? And culture of security is how does the business look at security? Is everyone familiar? Is everyone comfortable with security and putting that as a priority when they're building? And then we'll jump into a bit more of that, making security, right? Security is a concern greater than just that individual team and those individual people. We see PwC noted that 49% of CEOs cited cyber risk as a top concern in their 2022 survey. Similarly, Gartner noted that 88% of board of directors view cybersecurity as a business risk rather than just a technical risk. So it's impacting the business as a whole, not just the products and services that teams are using or building on. And then the SEC published recently, right, requiring disclosure of any cybersecurity incidents, and then further disclosure of the registrant's cybersecurity risk management strategy and governance in their annual reports. So we can see security is taking on a more holistic business role as opposed to just the technical teams that are focused on security. And we view that as a good thing, right? Security shouldn't be centralized and in one place where a security team feels overwhelmed, feels like they can't hire enough people to meet that demand for the company. Right? And we have Gartner also noting that by 2025, a single centralized cybersecurity function isn't agile enough to meet the demands of modern organizations or digital organizations. So CISOs, they have to reconceptualize that responsibility matrix and enable CEOs and other executives to make their own decisions in a comfortable environment, having security at top of mind, as opposed to always deferring to the CISO to make those decisions for them. Right, and the challenge that many organizations think security only belongs to that security department, and realistically, we want everyone in the organization to be responsible for security of their own team, their own products, and be comfortable, right? They should be familiar with the tooling and be able to put out a secure product. So we'll jump into sort of what does the evolution of security ownership look like at a business that's moving more towards a cloud-native security mindset or a decentralized security mindset. So we've got someone in IT, right, is the baby. This is where whenever you have a security question, whenever you need to, ask some security thing or run through some security review, you run back to the IT team. The IT team's responsible for it. They own all of the tooling. They're the ones that are familiar, as opposed to having a platform where any, product team can go in and manage their own sort of security piece. The next step within that evolution there would be the security team. So you have a centralized security team. They're working on building out those automations and the tooling for other teams to take advantage of. But they're still the primary owners. They're still primarily responsible for the security of the entire organization. And then next we have the adults, so the product owners. This is where things really start to change. There's enough automation and tooling in place. The company's familiar with it. The organization as a whole is familiar with the tooling. You still have the security team advising on how to use some of the tooling, how to implement properly. But product owners and product teams really feel safe and encouraged to use that tooling in an automated manner for performing security reviews, testing, vulnerability assessment, those sorts of things. And then our end goal here is an athlete where everyone's responsible for security within their org. Everyone's empowered to implement, automated tooling within their product suite and within their own teams. And everyone owns sort of their own security posture throughout the organization, leading to a more secure posture overall throughout the organization. What we also see are there are 4 key components when it comes to building that culture of security as opposed to a security culture. The first being communication and education, right? We have to enable people. We have to communicate and be able to communicate throughout the org, as well as educate the employees within an organization. And then second to that is executive support. If you don't have executive buy-in, it's hard to push any initiative throughout the org, and you really need the executive team on board with pushing security first, as opposed to just having a security team, just having a dedicated security function within the org. And then after that, we step into that more distributed ownership model. So where everyone's responsible for their own security posture, everyone's enabled to take advantage of those automations and tooling, and really changing from a single-threaded owner for security to the entire org owning their security posture. Right? And then the last and arguably one of the most important steps is psychological safety. Right? Everyone should feel empowered to call out a security concern or bring a security concern to the security team or to their owner for security without the fear of repercussions or any negative impact of that. Security threats and bringing those to attention should be viewed as a good thing, right? We want to become aware before it gets launched or before it's in a place where it can actually be taken advantage of, right? Catch it internally before we release the product. And that's where the psychological safety comes in. Everyone should feel empowered to bring up issues within the org, developers, product owners, team members, whoever it may be. And then we've got some key next steps here, right? I'll leave this up for a minute while I talk about these. So the AWS shared responsibility model, again, going back to that model that we saw earlier in the slides, where AWS is responsible for security of the cloud and ensuring that you all have a secure platform to build on top of, or a secure service to build on top of, whereas customers maintain that ownership of security in the cloud. So how you build applications in the cloud, how you encrypt data in transit and at rest, and how you store your data, segregate it between different customers, those sorts of things. And then we've got a link to AWS Security for Executives. So how do you position security from an executive lens as opposed to a more technical lens? And then lastly, that culture of security, which is really going to be, again, we want to build a culture of security within organizations as opposed to a strong security culture. Taking that back to the culture of security is the entire org. How does the entire organization view security? And the culture of security is, what is the culture of the security team? I appreciate you all coming out. It's great talking to you all today. Thank you all for joining me again. Again, my name is Hunter. I'm a solutions architect at AWS. It's great talking to you all. Thanks, everyone.